In the year 2543, Earth was a relatively unremarkable planet in the grand scheme of the galaxy, which was exactly how most humans preferred it. By that time, humans had seen enough of the universe to know that it was vast, dangerous, and filled with beings far more powerful, advanced, and let's be honest, petty than they were. The galaxy was crammed with species that had mastered technologies humans could barely comprehend, and who had developed cultures that spanned eons. And, as it so happened, many of these species had also developed a penchant for war. Galactic wars were, as far as humans were concerned, the equivalent of cosmic bar brawls. They tended to start over something trivial, like the mispronunciation of a supreme overlord's title or a mild insult to someone's planetary decor, and then spiral out of control until entire star systems were reduced to rubble. The participants in these wars were often ancient civilizations with histories of conflict so convoluted that even they couldn't remember what they were fighting about. But what they could remember, with alarming clarity, was who was allowed to bring the popcorn. And humans, it seemed, were never invited to the popcorn party. This was codified rather officially in the Galactic Concord of Non-Interference, a document so ancient that its original copies were etched on the imperishable scales of the great cosmic serpent, a creature that was rumored to still be alive somewhere in the depths of a black hole. Concord was a sprawling, labyrinthine document filled with clauses, subclauses, and footnotes that required a team of 7 intergalactic lawyers, a bottle of pan-dimensional brandy, and a week's worth of time dilation to fully interpret. Among its many decrees was one that particularly pertained to Earth. Clause 42.3b. Under no circumstances shall the species known as Homo sapiens be permitted to engage in, instigate, or otherwise participate in any galactic war, skirmish, or conflict. The reasons for this were as obscure as the rest of the Concord, though there were several theories. One popular theory was that this ban was a form of cosmic kindness. Humans, despite their best efforts, had never been particularly good at large-scale interstellar warfare. Their attempts were often clumsy, their strategies overly simplistic, and their weaponry, while occasionally inventive, was more likely to backfire than hit its target. The galaxy, in its infinite wisdom, had decided that allowing humans to participate in galactic wars would be akin to letting a toddler play with nuclear reactors. The potential for accidental self-destruction was simply too high. Another theory, more cynical and perhaps closer to the truth, was that humans were simply not worth the trouble. Galactic wars were a messy business, requiring participants to have a certain level of technological prowess, a mastery of strategy, and, most importantly, an ability to understand the complex, often absurd rules of engagement. Humans, with their tendency to question the rules, would likely just complicate. It was easier for everyone involved if they were kept out of it altogether. Whatever the reason, the ban was absolute, and it left humans in a rather peculiar position. On the one hand, they were excluded from the grand, often bloody theater of galactic politics. On the other, they were free to pursue their own interests without the looming threat of being dragged into someone else's war. While other species were busy vaporizing each other over territorial disputes, humans were free to focus on the things that really mattered to them, like perfecting the art of brewing coffee in zero gravity, or determining the exact length of time it took for a cat to adapt to space travel. The answer, it turned out, was somewhere between 3.7 and 4.2 seconds. For the most part, humans were content with this arrangement. They had no desire to get involved in the petty squabbles of the galaxy's elder races, nor did they wish to invite the wrath of some warlike species by accidentally insulting their choice of battle imp. The Concord allowed them to occupy a unique position in the galaxy, one of neutrality, irrelevance, and, in some cases, amusement. They were the cosmic equivalent of the odd neighbor who was always invited to the party but never actually showed up. And that suited them just fine. That is, until the day that Earth received an invitation to the most exclusive event in the galaxy, the 100th Annual Galactic War Games. The invitation came in the form of a holographic message, delivered by none other than the Grand High Chancellor of the Galactic Council, a being of such immense power and prestige that even his holograms were required to be treated with the utmost respect. The message was addressed to the leaders of Earth, who, upon receiving it, promptly called an emergency meeting of the United Nations Space Command. The hologram of the Chancellor flickered to life in the center of the UN Space Command chamber, casting an ethereal glow over the assembled leaders. The Chancellor was an imposing figure, with a visage that defied easy description. He seemed to be composed of swirling energies, his form constantly shifting and reforming like a nebula in the process of becoming a star. His voice, when he spoke, was deep and resonant, vibrating through the very atoms of the room. "Greetings, inhabitants of Earth," the Chancellor began, with a tone that suggested he had far more important things to do than address a minor species from the outskirts of the galaxy. "It has come to the attention of the Galactic Council that your planet has been selected to participate in this year's Galactic War Games." The leaders of Earth exchanged puzzled glances. The War Games were legendary, the ultimate test of military prowess, strategy, and cunning, where the most powerful species in the galaxy vied for dominance. It was a spectacle watched by trillions, and the winning species earned not only bragging rights but also substantial political influence for the next century. The idea that Earth had been selected to participate was, to say the least, unexpected. The Chancellor continued, seemingly oblivious to the confusion of his audience. "I am aware of Clause 42.3b of the Galactic Concord," he said, his tone suggesting that he found the clause as tedious as everyone else did. "However, the selection process for the War Games is entirely random, and the Council has decided that this year an exception will be made. You will be allowed to compete." With that, the hologram flickered and vanished, leaving the leaders of Earth in stunned silence. After what felt like an eternity, someone finally spoke. It was General Samantha Drake, the head of the United Nations Space Command, and a woman known for her unflappable demeanor. "Well," she said, her voice carefully measured, "this is unexpected." "Unexpected?" echoed President Jackson, the current head of the United Earth government, his voice tinged with disbelief. "This is a disaster. We're not prepared for something like this. We don't even have the technology to compete with the likes of the Zogthar Empire or the Myrmidon Hive. Not to mention," added Dr. Lin Wei, the chief scientist of the Space Command, "our understanding of galactic warfare is rudimentary at best. We've spent centuries avoiding it, not preparing for it." General Drake shook her head. "No, this isn't a disaster. Not yet. It's an opportunity." "An opportunity?" President Jackson looked at her as if she had lost her mind. "Yes," Drake replied firmly, "an opportunity to prove that humans can adapt to any situation. Besides, if we're going to be thrust into this, we might as well make the best of it. We have a chance to show the galaxy that there's more to us than they think." There was a murmur of agreement, though it was clear that many of the leaders were still far from convinced. But General Drake's words had struck a chord. Humanity had always thrived in the face of adversity. Why should this be any different? The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Earth's best scientists, engineers, and strategists were brought together in a frantic effort to prepare for the War Games. They studied every scrap of information they could find on past games, trying to discern patterns, strategies, anything that might give them an edge. New technologies were developed at a breakneck pace, and old ones were modified and adapted in ways that would have been considered reckless under normal circumstances. And yet, despite the frenetic preparation, there was an underlying current of skepticism. Earth was, after all, still a relatively insignificant player on the galactic stage. The other competitors would be centuries, if not millennia, ahead in terms of technology and experience. The odds of victory were, by any rational calculation, astronomically low. As the days ticked down to the start of the War Games, a sense of grim determination settled over the planet. The people of Earth knew they were underdogs, but they also knew that they had been underestimated before. If nothing else, they were determined to put up a fight. Finally, the day arrived. The War Games were held in a neutral sector of space, a vast, empty expanse that had been designated as the battlefield. The competing species arrived in their battle fleets, each one more impressive than the last. The Zogthar Empire, with their massive, heavily armored dreadnoughts that bristled with weaponry. The Myrmidon Hive, with their sleek, insectoid ships that moved with terrifying speed and precision. The Vorten Collective, a race of sentient machines whose ships were as cold and efficient as they were. And then there was Earth. The human fleet was small and unassuming by comparison, a motley collection of ships cobbled together from whatever technology could be repurposed in time. There was the USS Endeavour, an old warship retrofitted with the latest in human ingenuity, was to say, lot of duct tape and hope. The Dauntless, an exploration vessel now bristling with experimental weapons that no one was entirely sure would work. And the Resolute, a cargo ship converted into a makeshift carrier for a squadron of drones that had been programmed with a hybrid AI system, was definitely, probably, not going to go rogue. As the fleets assembled in the void, the humans stood out as the underdogs, a ragtag group of improvisers in a sea of polished, precise war machines. The viewing platforms of the galaxy's elite were filled with spectators eager to see the inevitable humiliation of Earth. After all, how could these upstarts hope to compete with civilizations that had been perfecting warfare for millennia? But there was one thing that the rest of the galaxy had forgotten. A detail buried deep in the annals of galactic history, glossed over as an anomaly, fluke, an exception to the rule. Humans had been banned from participating in galactic wars, not because they were incompetent or technologically inferior, but because they had a disturbing habit of making everyone else look bad. The war games began with the usual pomp and ceremony, the Grand High Chancellor himself giving the signal to start. The first challenge was a tactical simulation, where each fleet had to navigate a series of asteroid fields and deploy ground units to capture strategic points on a barren moon. The Zogthar dreadnoughts moved with the precision of a well-oiled machine, their massive ships carving through the asteroids like a knife through butter. The Myrmidon Hive swarmed with their insectoid ships, overwhelming the defenses of the other competitors with sheer numbers and speed. The Vorten Collective, cold and calculating, employed their vast computational power to predict and counter every move made by their opponents. And then there were the humans, whose approach to the challenge could only be described as unconventional. The USS Endeavour wove through the asteroid field in a series of erratic, unpredictable maneuvers that made it impossible for the other fleets to get a lock on it. The Dauntless launched its experimental weaponry, which, to everyone's astonishment, turned the asteroids themselves into makeshift projectiles that wreaked havoc on the carefully planned formations of the other fleets. And the Resolute? Its drones didn't just capture strategic points. They repurposed the moon's own resources to build a makeshift fortress that was so over-engineered it defied logic. By the end of the first challenge, the human fleet had not only survived, but had outperformed their rivals in ways that left the rest of the galaxy's elite scratching their heads. The humans had taken what should have been a straightforward tactical exercise and turned it into something entirely different. Chaotic, unpredictable, and ultimately victorious effort that left the other competitors scrambling to catch up. The second challenge was a test of technological prowess, where each species had to demonstrate their most advanced weaponry in a controlled environment. The Zogthar Empire unveiled a planet cracker cannon, a weapon so powerful it could shatter a small moon with a single shot. The Myrmidon Hive demonstrated a bioweapon that could rapidly terraform a planet into a hostile environment for any species not adapted to their specific biology. The Vorten Collective revealed a nanoswarm that could disassemble entire ships at the molecular level. The humans, on the other hand, had something rather different in mind. The USS Endeavour deployed a device that was, at first glance, unimpressive. A small, spherical object floated lazily in space. The other competitors watched in confusion as the humans activated the device, which promptly emitted a low-frequency hum. Then, the impossible happened. The Zogthar planet cracker cannon, poised to demonstrate its devastating power, suddenly sputtered and died. The Myrmidon bioweapon containers ruptured, spilling harmless goo into the void. The Vorten nanoswarm? It simply froze in place, its programming scrambled by some unknown interference. The human device, it turned out, was a jamming field generator. piece of technology so simple, so basic, that the other species hadn't even considered it a threat. But in the hands of the humans, it became a weapon of unparalleled effectiveness. It neutralized the most advanced technologies in the galaxy with a wave of its metaphorical hand, leaving the other competitors impotent and humiliated. By the end of the second challenge, the mood among the other competitors had shifted from smug confidence to outright panic. The humans, with their makeshift fleet and unorthodox strategies, were winning, and worse, they were making it look easy. Final challenge was a simulated battle. Classic capture the flag scenario, but with the flags being heavily armed space stations and the battlefield being an expanse of space littered with debris, asteroids, and the occasional wandering black hole. The rules were simple. First fleet to capture the opposing stations and safely return with the flags would win the war game. The Zogthar Empire, still smarting from their earlier failures, took a direct approach. They unleashed their full armada, intending to overwhelm the competition with sheer firepower. The Myrmidon Hive, ever the strategists, deployed their ships in a complex, multi-layered formation designed to encircle and crush their opponents. The Vorten Collective, predictably, calculated the most efficient path to victory and executed their plan with cold precision. The humans, on the other hand, seemed to be doing absolutely nothing. The other fleets waited, growing increasingly uneasy as the human ships simply floated in space, engines idling, no apparent intention of moving. The viewership across the galaxy, which had swelled to unprecedented numbers, buzzed with speculation. Had the humans finally run out of tricks? Was this the moment when their luck would run out? Then, just as the Zogthar dreadnoughts were about to engage, the USS Endeavour slowly, almost lazily, drifted forward. Aboard the ship, General Samantha Drake leaned back in her command chair, looking entirely too relaxed for someone about to face the most powerful fleets in the galaxy. "What's the plan, General?" asked Captain Lee, her second in command, who was busy fiddling with a cup of zero-gravity coffee that refused to cooperate. "Plan?" Drake echoed, a mischievous grin spreading across her face. "We don't need a plan. We have a secret weapon." Captain Lee raised an eyebrow. "Secret weapon? You mean the jamming field?" Drake shook her head. "Nope. Something even better." Before Captain Lee could ask what possibly could be better, Drake activated the ship's communication system. Across the battlefield, a broadcast signal went out, transmitting on all frequencies. The other fleets paused, wary of what new trick the humans might be pulling. Then they heard it. The opening notes of Yakety Sax blared through every speaker, every communication device, and every neural implant within 1,000 light-years. The jaunty, absurdly fast-paced tune filled the void of space, bouncing off the hulls of ships and echoing through the command centers of the other fleets. The effect was instantaneous. The Zogthar dreadnoughts, their crews already on edge, suddenly found themselves struggling to maintain formation as the ridiculous music played havoc with their coordination. Pilots who had been raised on strict military discipline were now desperately trying to suppress the urge to laugh as their ships began to veer off course, colliding with each other in a series of slow-motion fender benders that would have been hilarious if not for the fact that they were in the middle of a war game. The Myrmidon Hive, meanwhile, experienced a catastrophic breakdown in their hive mind communication. The relentless beat of Yakety Sax proved too much for their carefully synchronized mental network, causing their ships to zigzag unpredictably as individual pilots lost track of the collective strategy. What had been an impenetrable formation quickly devolved into a chaotic swarm, with ships bumping into each other like a disorganized flock of geese. As for the Vorten Collective, their vast computational power was brought to its metaphorical knees by the sheer absurdity of the situation. The Collective's AI, which had been designed to process vast amounts of data and execute complex strategies, found itself completely unable to cope with the nonsensical nature of the music. The Vorten ships began executing random maneuvers, their hyperlogical minds thrown into disarray by the sheer illogic of it all. Back on Earth, the entire planet was watching the spectacle unfold, with a mixture of disbelief and hysterical laughter. The human fleet, still broadcasting Yakety Sax at full volume, began their advance. The USS Endeavour led the charge, followed by the Dauntless and the Resolute, whose drones, now equipped with flashing lights and streamers, performed a synchronized dance routine that would have been right at home in a circus. The other fleets, now thoroughly demoralized and in complete disarray, offered little resistance as the human ships swooped in and captured the opposing space stations. The flags were secured with a minimum of fuss, and the human fleet made its way back to the starting point, still accompanied by the relentless, cheerful strains of yakety sax. When the final score was tallied, the result was undeniable. The humans had won the war games, and they had done it in the most unexpected, ridiculous, utterly humiliating way possible. As the humans celebrated their victory aboard the USS Endeavour, the rest of the galaxy struggled to process what had just happened. The war games, which were supposed to be a serious test of military might and strategic acumen, had devolved into what could only be described as an interstellar farce. And the worst part? The humans had won. Handily, decisively, and with an infuriatingly casual attitude that suggested they hadn't even broken a sweat. The Grand High Chancellor of the Galactic Council, who had been observing the games from his luxurious viewing platform, was livid. His swirling, nebulous form pulsed with barely contained fury as he attempted to regain his composure in front of the other dignitary. The humans had made a mockery of the war game, and by extension, the entire Galactic Council. But the Chancellor wasn't the only one fuming. The Zogthar Overlord, a towering creature covered in battle scars and ceremonial armor, stared at the replay of the humans' antics with a mixture of disbelief and seething rage. It was bad enough that his dreadnoughts had been bested. To be outmaneuvered by a bunch of primates playing circus music was an insult that would be remembered for generations. The Myrmidon Queen, her multifaceted eyes glinting with anger, similarly incensed. The Hive's meticulously crafted battle plan had been undone by something as trivial as a human prank. Loss of synchronization within the Hive mind was a disgrace, one that she knew would haunt her for cycles to come. And then there was the Vorton Collective, whose AI-controlled ships had been paralyzed by a simple tune. The Collective, known for its emotionless efficiency, was now experiencing a new sensation: frustration. The AI had analyzed the situation repeatedly, trying to make sense of what had happened, but every time the conclusion was the same. There was no logical explanation for the humans' victory. As the leaders of the galaxy fumed, the humans continued to celebrate in their usual, irreverent manner. The USS Endeavour's crew had thrown an impromptu party in the ship's mess hall, complete with music, dancing, and a variety of foods made no sense to anyone but them. The galactic news networks, unable to resist the spectacle, broadcasted the human celebration live, much to the chagrin of the other species watching. It wasn't long before the humans' behavior began to grate on the nerves of their fellow competitors even more. For starters, the humans had a habit of being annoyingly friendly. After the games, they sent congratulatory messages to the other fleets, thanking them for a good game and offering to share their secret to success. Combination of improvisation, coffee-fueled brainstorming sessions, and a good sense of humor. The Zogthar Overlord, who had never been thanked for losing in his entire life, nearly shattered his communication console in rage. Then there was the matter of the humans' technology, or rather, their lack of. The other species had spent centuries perfecting their war machines, investing vast resources into honing the most advanced technologies the galaxy had ever seen. The humans, on the other hand, had cobbled together a fleet out of what looked like spare parts and sheer determination. And yet, despite their crude equipment, they had managed to win. It was as if the humans were thumbing their noses at the very concept of technological superiority. The final straw came a few days later when the Galactic Council held a formal ceremony to award the humans their victory. The event was supposed to be a solemn occasion, befitting the gravity of the war games and the prestige of the Galactic Council. The humans, however, had other ideas. The ceremony took place in the Great Hall of the Council, an awe-inspiring chamber filled with representatives from every major species in the galaxy. The humans, led by General Drake, entered the hall with an air of casual confidence, as if they were attending a neighborhood barbecue rather than one of the most important events in galactic history. As the Grand High Chancellor began to deliver his speech, extolling the virtues of the war games and the honor of victory, the humans listened politely. First. But as the speech droned on, some of the human delegates began to fidget. A few minutes later, one of them, Captain Lee, pulled out a small device and started typing on it. The other humans glanced at him, then at each other, and before long they were all engrossed in their devices, barely paying attention to the Chancellor. It wasn't until the Chancellor finally reached the climax of his speech. And so, it is with great honor that we present the victors of the 100th Annual Galactic War Games. Humans react. General Drake stood up, grinning broadly, and accepted the ceremonial Hoff, a massive, ornate object that was clearly designed to impress. The trophy shimmered with 1,000 intricate engravings, each one a symbol of the countless battles fought and won by the galaxy's greatest warriors. It was a relic of immense historical significance, a piece of art that had been crafted by a long-extinct species renowned for their artistry. General Drake held the trophy up, examining it with a curious expression, as if she were trying to figure out its purpose. The entire hall watched in tense silence, waiting for the humans to finally show the proper respect that the occasion, the trophy, deserved. Instead, Drake turned to Captain Lee, who was still absorbed in his device, and asked, "What do you think, Lee? Do you reckon this thing would look good on the bridge, maybe next to the coffee maker?" The Grand High Chancellor's swirling form pulsed with indignation. "General Drake, that is the most prestigious award in the galaxy. It represents, the blood, sweat, and tears of 1,000 civilizations or something?" Drake interrupted, waving her hand dismissively. "But honestly, it's a bit much, don't you think? I mean, where would we even put it? It's bigger than my quarters." Captain Lee finally looked up from his device and squinted at the trophy. "We could always use it to prop open the hangar bay doors. They've been sticking lately." The gathered dignitaries gasped in horror. Zogthar Overlord's fists clenched so tightly that the metal armrests of his chair began to bend. The Myrmidon Queen's antennae twitched in outrage. The Vorton Collective's representative, a sleek silver automaton, emitted a series of sharp beeps that roughly translated to something between error and does not compute. Oblivious to the growing outrage around them, the humans continued their irreverent banter. "Or we could turn it into a really fancy lamp," suggested Lieutenant Ramirez, another member of the human delegation. "It'd go great with the lava lamp we've got in the rec room." General Drake snorted with laughter. "Now, that's an idea. We could say it's illuminating history." The pun was the final straw. The Grand High Chancellor, who had prided himself on his nearly infinite patience, could no longer contain himself. "Enough," he thundered, his voice echoing through the great hall. "You humans have disgraced this ceremony, this trophy, and the very spirit of the war games. Do you have no respect for the traditions of the galaxy?" The humans finally fell silent, but the smirks on their faces suggested they weren't taking the Chancellor's outburst very seriously. General Drake, still holding the trophy, stepped forward. "With all due respect, Chancellor, we didn't come here to win a shiny paperweight. We came here to show that humans aren't just some backwater species to be ignored. We're resourceful, we're adaptable, and we might do things a little differently, but that's what makes us human." She paused, looking around the hall at the fuming representatives of the galaxy's most powerful species. "You all take this stuff so seriously. Your wars, your traditions, your trophies. But what did any of it really achieve? The war games are supposed to be about proving who's the best, right? Well, we proved it, and we did it our way. Maybe it's time the rest of you took a step back and realized that there's more than one way to win a war." The Chancellor's form flickered with barely suppressed fury, but before he could respond, the Vorton Collective's representative stood up. "The human is correct," it stated in its cold, mechanical voice. "They have demonstrated a capacity to achieve victory through unconventional means. This is a data point that cannot be ignored." The Myrmidon Queen, still bristling with anger, hissed, "Their methods are an affront to the honor of the games. They turned a sacred competition into a mockery." The Zogthar Overlord, who had been seething in silence, finally spoke. His voice was a deep, rumbling growl. "They may have won this time, but it was a fluke. Humans are nothing more than a cosmic joke, and their victory will be short-lived. The next war games will show their true place in the galaxy. General Drake shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe we'll just keep showing up and winning, and you'll have to get used to it. The tension in the hall was palpable. The humans, standing defiantly in the face of the galaxy's most powerful beings, were clearly not intimidated. And that, more than anything else, was what infuriated the other species. The humans didn't just win, they did it with a smile, a joke, a seemingly happy-go-lucky style, which the aliens had trouble doing.